I was in Orissa in 2018, and I was walking around the Konark Sun Temple, which was built somewhere in like 11th century, 12th century CE. And there is an inscription of a giraffe in one of the stones outside the temple. And giraffe is not native animal to India. Like, so what does it tell? Like, it could be a reason why this kingdom was trading with Africans, and either they would have gone to Africa and see a giraffe, or they would have gifted the king a giraffe, because the gifting was a common thing among those times, right? So that is why they would have seen a giraffe and they would have put it in a stone.
This is going to be a fascinating conversation about a very important subject. It's called history. We all know history. We all want to know history. But why should we learn about history is what I'm going to delve into today. We are going to talk about historical elements and everything later on in subsequent episodes. But today I'm joined by Anand Narayanan, who's basically one of the most history loving guys I've ever come across. I'll tell you why. If you give him a dish to eat, the first thing he will think about is how did this come into existence and the history of that particular dish. And this is so relevant in today's world that this perspective can actually help everyone, especially us, the millennials. So to discuss more about history, I'm joined by a history buff, a very curious guy, and it's going to be a fun conversation. So stay tuned for this conversation with Anand Narayan. Hey Anand, history is a fascinating subject, isn't it? I mean, if you look at history that we have learned in school, and the historical things that are coming out now in the open, especially about South Indian history, I remember going to school and learning a lot more about North Indian history, learning a lot more about the colonial times that India was in, but not much importance was given to maybe a couple of paragraphs about Pallavas, a couple of paragraphs about the Cholas, and so on and so forth. But me being in Bangalore and looking around and go to Mysore, and you see so many, places of historical interest and historical importance, if I can use that word, and even going to Hampi, looking at the kind of things that were there. But we have not learned much. And today, I really, really want to be the student and learn a lot more from about my region, that is South India's, richness and heritage, culture, and history. So over to you, man.
Thanks, man. That's a nice way to look at the history, right? I mean, you're not a student. We are all students here, because we are every day we are unearthing a new evidence, or we kind of finding something new, and then we kind of like want to rewrite the history, or like rethink about what was, like a very simple example, right? Like, I think this happened in 2017, that they were doing some excavation work in Hyderabad University, uh, just for a new construction, and they found some iron uh, kind of equipments or utensils there, which I think carbon dated to 3000 BCE, common era.
Okay.
And your Iron Age starts somewhere around 2500 BCE in our books. Now you got to rethink the history, because you already found evidence which was like 500 years back. So as we unearth more data, we're gonna go back to history. I'm not an archaeologist, or I'm not an history student, but my passion for history is what had given me a lot of uh, time or effort I put into research history, and d- especially South Indian history, right? Because we're all from the CBSE school of thought, where like we have like, say first the Turks come, then the Mughals come, then the colonials come. Yeah, hey, that's everyone is in like Delhi Sultanate. There are a lot of power crises in Delhi. People are just fighting with each other, and then suddenly the colonials come through the south, and then they take over. They come through Kerala, and then they go up north. They conquer the India, and this all happened what, 700 AD plus. I think the first colonial invasion happened in 800 AD. Sorry, CE now, Common Era. And then it's just like a story, a litany of battles, which was just lost by different rulers in India, right? That's basically the history. And history is always used to be a boring subject in school also, right? And I'm pretty sure, like even for you,
I'll just give you my 2 cents on why it was boring. We were forced to by heart the dates and the years and everything instead of just looking at, okay, this happened and learn more about it. Or maybe it was not a story form that, see, we all like stories. As humans, we love stories. If somebody tells me a historical story, I will listen. whether it's about the Cold War, whether it's about South India history. But in schools, we are taught to learn saying Delhi Sultanate, this happened in this year, by heart this year, by heart that year. That's why it became very boring. That's what I find. I mean,
Exactly, right? So you're taught in history in not a way it should be like, it should be consumed by the, I mean, obviously as students you have an examination to clear, so there are certain parameters in learning. The other thing is, like, I think for me usually history period is always after lunch time. So lunch time, the first period after used to be the history. So either first of all you're drowsy and you're kind of sleepy, and then suddenly your teacher comes and like, hey, you know this Mughal ruler, he was building mosques and like different structures across India, and like you're like sleeping. And then you have like a lot of these names which is in Persian, which is not, you're not used to, because all your Akbar's way of ruling are all written in Persian, right? And you're not used to all these things. So I think history was very much centered into a very Delhi focused history for India. And it's completely, like I told you, the 2 paragraphs about Cholas, Cheras, and like these are kingdoms which have spanned for like centuries, right? And there is no written Aghum dynasty, which is a famous kingdom in the northeast India. Even Mughals couldn't conquer northeast India because of the power of Aghum dynasty, right? And you don't even know about Aghum. There's not even a single paragraph. Forget about like so many paragraphs, right? So that's the history, I think, which actually pushed me to read about this, understand about it, because history is a subject which you don't need scholarly advice. You pick up a book, you go around the place, you find things, then you think about yourself, like, what happened, or like, why is this here? What is the relevance? This was built in 12th century. Why is this here in an inscription? Example I will give: um, I was in Orissa in 2018, and I was walking around the Konark Sun Temple, which was built somewhere in like 11th century, 12th century CE, and there is an inscription of a giraffe in one of those stones outside the temple. And giraffe is not native animal to India. Like, so what does it tell? Like, it could be a reason why this kingdom was trading with Africans, and either they would have gone to Africa and see a giraffe, or they would have gifted the king a giraffe, because gifting was a common thing among those times, right? So that is why they would have seen a giraffe and they would have put it in a stone. I mean, there are other, I think, some of those temples have structures of some specific species of a dinosaur. I mean, too far fetched, could be imagination also, but you never know. There are like rumors that they have still sighting of a specific species of dinosaur in somewhere in Africa. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of these things, and some of the things they would have seen, some of the things from their imagination. So that is what they carve into those sculptures and like put it in their stories, right? Like, stories are always fascinating when you have masala into it. Some of the things will be masala, and some of the things will be, I mean, so for example, like Ram using an airplane like Pushpak to abduct Sita. It's a fascinating story, right? Now, without research, if you go and say like we had Vimana Shastra, there's definitely a book which has Vimana Shastra, but just telling that we used to operate airlines is a blunder to do, right? You got to do enough research, you got to do the work behind it, and just not claim that okay, there was airplanes at that time. I mean, it could have been a nice thought process, right? Okay, like everyone is going through land, now I'll fly like a bird and like the people can't reach, because books are always written with that kind of extra drama, right? Like that drama is what brings audience attention, right? So it could have been changed even later also. So that's the way I think history should be perceived. Everyone should think about the history, think what I think could have happened. That's when everyone will start discussing. History should be not a topic where I read and I understand that's end of it.
Yeah.
You got to debate it. You got to talk to people, right? History should be in mainstream discussions. That's when you talk. I think some of these recent movies, right, like your Kantara, which talks about the Bhuta Kola, or Punin Selvan, which talks about the Chola history, has brought into that mainstream discussion. Now, a lot of people in India who didn't know about kingdoms in South India knows about Chola Empire, right, which is a huge empire, right? Like they had built temple structures which are bigger than Taj Mahal, which are like more magnificent. I'm not telling more, but equally complex, magnificent. Yeah. Then we have temples in the Kashinath temple in Aurangabad, right, the Ellora. And you look at the technology of how those temples, there are like rumors like this by aliens and all this stuff. I mean, we're not getting into that kind of stuff, but think about the effort. And I mean, they would have built it over centuries, right, to carve a structure completely out of a rock, because it's a rock just cut down from top and made into temples. There's so many corridors, so many pillars, all carved perfectly with just chisels, right? Like they didn't have like big equipments. And I think one of these temples in Karnataka, Hoysaleshwara temple, right? You have those pillars. I mean, you can chisel your corners, but to make a round shape, you can't chisel. You need a lathe machine to like. They would have used those technologies back in 11th century, right? Like lathe technology, which gives you a perfect circle for a pillar. I'm not telling this should be taught in school. Like it'll be too much of information, but at least from a standpoint that okay, like it's fine to have that North, like probably Mughal history, and it's all fine, but there's no reason to subdue the other part of Indian history, right? Like Indian history doesn't start in 700 AD. It has a rich history. I mean, think about it, right? Like Harappans are there. Then even the timelines of Harappans is now getting predated, right? Like they're finding new sites like Rakhigad, Bir Rana, which is getting dated to 7,000, 8,000 BCE, right? So that's like even before what our history was talking about, 3,000 BC, right? So Harappans, even the civilization is getting backdated. Imagine like suddenly you have a civilization for like 3000, 2000 BCE, and then suddenly there's a shift to 700 AD. What happened in this 1000, 2000 years, right? There's a lot of timeline, and you just mugged it. That is the history I think we should give light to people. And that has a lot of history which is concerned or probably focused on southern part of India because they were actively trading with different people like the Chinese, the Romans. The Roman Empire had trade routes with India. The Venice had trade routes to India. The Arabs were constantly trading with India. These are the points I think was somewhere lost when these textbooks were written. I think that is a time. This is a time when we got to revive that, and even some of those British or the Mughal history, or even those will require some of the revisiting of certain things, right? I mean, because history is always written from the standpoint of a ruler, right? Like if I am writing my history, I'm gonna glorify myself, right? Or if the other read would be like if that, so for example, a king from Kalinga is writing about Ashoka, he'll have a different view about Ashoka, right? The narrators of Ashoka will like he's a great king, and but the Kalinga king will have a different view. Even this disciples or probably the citizens of Mauryan Empire will have a different view about Ashoka. Different sects of people, how they treated, they'll have different views, right? So history is not just textbooks. It is a lot. It has resides a lot of folklores. For example, Bhudakola, right? Bhudakola is very similar to the Theyyam art in Kerala. So there's a very similar kind of art structure, the makeup, the art they perform very similar to the again northern part of Kerala, Kasargod. So it's I mean borders are just drawn as line, right? People don't stick to borders. And these the Theyyam art, the stories they tell is basically the stories of caste system, right? Like because mostly these are performed by lower caste Hindus back then, and they used to use this as a medium to show their aggression. So history, if you look at only through the text, it'll be only those elite class people who are writing their king's history. History is also a layer beneath, and much layer beneath, and these people communicate through their folklores, through their dramas, or the plays, which is also like found a space. And that's how you think about a culture. That's how you think about a history of a specific place. It has nothing to do with, say, which ruler ruled. I mean, there has been rulers everywhere, but what about the people there? Why was this a specific thing, and why did Islam come to India, or why did Christianity come to India? Right? Like, was it just because the rulers wanted them to come, or the people had already interacted with these people? There's a lot of discussions there. So we can focus on any of these aspects. I mean, because if you're not talk about history, geography becomes equally important, right? The why the North Indian territories were easily like conquered, or probably different kind of conquerors came, is because they can come through the Central Asian plateau and then cross the Hindu Kush and come to India through that landmass, right? They just need horses to do that. But think about conquering, say, Karnataka, like conquering Mangalore or Goa. They need a huge navy to do that. And naval technology was not that big, right? Like you had shipping trades and all, but to run an army and conquer a land from the sea is a difficult thing. So that way we didn't see a lot of conquest versus the Delhi, Punjab, all those regions, because people would come from North Central Asia through that landmass. And that is why the history is completely different there, and the history completely different is here. Like it's more like I wouldn't say it's a peace, because here the infighting is between the kings, right? Like so, say the Kakatiyas are fighting, then the Vijayanagara Empire is fighting with 3 other kingdoms next to them. So it's like an IPL, right? Like I'm fighting like CSK versus RCB kind of scenario here, and there it was more like an international match. Like suddenly somebody comes from Iran or like Persia and they're like attacking you. So think about it like that. So infighting was always there. Infighting was it's a part of conquest, right? Like even Vijayanagar would have extended, or Cholas would have gone to other territories, Sri Lanka, and conquered those lands. It would have involved violence, would have involved warfare, right?
Yeah.
So it was not just like, oh, South Indians are all peaceful. No. So history has a different way of looking at things. So understanding why this mainstream history or South Indian history didn't come could be a reason of politics, which I'm not interested into getting to. But yeah, there is history is always a
Believe me, even we are not.
yeah, it's a political tool which can be used in any way. The narrative you create, it's like looking at a performance chart of say for a company, right? You put it a 1 year time frame, it looks very amazing. But say if you extend it to 5 years, maybe that stock would have been like so high and came down and then kind of climbing up, right? So it's a very selective thing you can show to the world, right? Like, hey, this part of history, we are all conquered and uh, we kind of were ruled by different people. And British needed to create this theory because Indians needed British needed an accreditation, right? Like, why would people trust you? Why would people trust you with their governance? So they got to spread a theory which says, hey, you are a country which has always been ruled. You are good subordinates, or you good citizens to be ruled, but you don't have the capability to rule yourself because you have different. So you kind of create the sense in people that, okay, we have been a culture which has always been ruled, which was not the scenario. And there's a lot of interesting things where we can like think about digging out.
There's so many things that we learned growing up, right? India has never conquered. India has always been conquered. But if you look at the Chola Empire, they did have some, outside the subcontinent conquests as well. That's number one. Number two, they say India cannot rule a huge chunk of land on its own. But that's not true. There's so many empires that existed in India much before all the invasions that were ruling India quite comfortably.
Exactly.
Okay, so look, no empire is completely good. No empire is completely bad. It's a shade of gray, right? And one more thing, to just add to what you just said about history, right? History has always been a share of perspectives. It's never facts. Okay, sometimes there are facts which are visible to the naked eye, maybe on your pillars of temples, maybe scriptures or manuscripts written way back in the day, and even doing carbon dating. Those are actual facts, but facts cannot show emotions.
Facts has to be factored.
Facts need to be fact checked. You need to check those facts. But again, if there are facts about, say, this empire existed from this time to this year, okay, the timeline, but you cannot really look into the emotional angle of everybody. Were they ruled? Were they in a dictatorship? Because you know what? There are countries which are so-called dictatorship-based countries where the citizens are equally happy. So the perspectives are very different because it's a very human thing. No human being is similar. And like the same time, so history is a share of perspectives. What I don't really appreciate, or what I don't really agree with what's happening in the world today, is that, you know what, if a historian comes and tells you or me that this is what it is, you have to take his side, or you have to take her opinion and say, okay, these are facts. But in reality, you have a different perspective of history. I have a different perspective of history. Because it also depends on where you come from. Okay, you mentioned something very interesting about Kantara. Okay, I have this. I genuinely believe the reason why Kantara became such a huge hit is because it's not just one Bhuta Kola that happens in a small section of coastal Karnataka, southern coastal Karnataka. There are things very similar to this happening in Kerala. If that movie touched the chord with a lot of people saying that, you know what, I can relate to this because this is my culture.
Exactly.
This is what my ancestors taught me. This is what I have learned growing up. That's the reason why it became such a phenomenal, successful movie, which is good. It was a very pro-culture movie, but it also showed the real culture of India.
Real culture, yeah. I mean, there'll be like definitely angles to it, right? Like, so I would go a step beyond saying that history is not even gray. It's like a spectrum of colors, right? Like, I mean, black and white used to be the concept. We've come to more comfortable of gray, but even gray is like a limitation. You have a spectrum of colors for history. Yeah, I mean, like it's a spectrum of red, blue, white, green, every kind of colors you see in history, right? It's just about so that I think we were talking, right? Like the story of Tipu Sultan, right? Like, so Tipu Sultan has been like a whitewashed figure to say he is a Muslim tyrant ruler, which kind of ruled, which kind of looted temples, destroyed temples. Uh, uh, but that's one perspective of looking at it. Tipu Sultan at the same time had funded a lot of temples to his disciples or kingdoms who have placed allegiance. For example, there is uh, the Padmanabha Swami temple in Trivandrum, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically the family temple of the Travancore kingdom. So he had made statements like, "I want to conquer this kingdom and tie my horse to the mast of this Padmanabha Swami temples." So it's kind of a statement he's trying to tell, "I will conquer this kingdom." Whereas in the similar scenario, there's a Kolangod princess. Like the Kolangod is a area in Palakkad in Kerala. They had a kingdom and they pledged allegiance to Tipu, and Tipu funded creating a pedestal for their murti in their family temple. So a same ruler can be like violent towards when he's conquering, but he will be like very nice person when he's addressing his citizens, right? So there are all shades of people.
You know what? This exists in the world even today.
Yes, it
You're
is
good
right.
to your allies, you're bad to people who are against you.
Against you, right?
As
Like,
simple
so,
as that, yeah.
So when you're only talking about the Muslim tyrant Tipu Sultan, you're missing out a lot of other good things he's talking, right? So history has to be looked at perspective. What perspective you're looking at, and that perspective will give you a idea of what spectrums these people operated in. Every one of these kings would have committed some kind of violence, right? Because unless they show that violent nature that I can rule you, and if you challenge me, I'm gonna punish you, it's going to be a real thing. Even Vijayanagar Empire, there are written records which says Krishnadevaraya used to. Uh, there is one coup against him to assassinate him, and then he literally chopped off that guy's head, held it in his hand, and then did a procession through the streets holding the head. It is a statement, right? You're making a statement to people like, you try to challenge me, you're gonna get punished, right? Like there are like brutal murder techniques written in some of these books. Like you'll be tied into an elephant, and the elephant will move into two different directions. You'll split your bodies. So
which empire is this?
So I can't remember this empire. I think it's one of this Deccan Sultans empire,
Okay.
which are trying to. I mean, Deccan has a rich culture, right? Like as much as a South Indian. When the only Deccan we know is the Marathas, right? Like the Marathas, we study Shivaji again. Yeah. Shivaji is the only ruler we know. We don't talk about the Peshwas who came after Marathas. Yeah. And the reason why Marathas are studied, because Marathas are the one who took over from Mughals, right? Mm-hmm. And if you want to talk about Mughals, then you want to talk about Marathas, because then the British took over from Marathas, right? That's the timeline. So you cannot fill that gap because people will ask questions. So this richness from the Deccan Plateau, like probably south of Narmada, was probably untouched, man. Like it's that part of history which is not been taught. There is an African king in Deccan Sultans. His name was Malik Amber.
Okay.
So he came as a slave trade as a kid to India. He was bought by the British, and he was bought by the rulers of Calcutta, and then he moves to the court of Deccans, and then he shows warfare. He had a good flair with warfare, and he was helping Deccans fight with the Mughals.
Okay.
And then eventually he rises up to the post where he becomes the king or the chief of the Deccan Empire.
Okay.
And there is a beautiful book by Manu S. Pillai, The Deccan Sultans, which tells the story about this. And Malik Amber's daughter was married to Shivaji's predecessors.
Oh.
So,
wow.
I mean, that's how you create legitimacy, right? Like, I'll get married my daughter to another king, and then I create the legitimacy. So, all these kind of political tools are used to rule people. So, that's why the spectrum of colors, like rather like black and white, all these people had influence over their people, and they kind of created that environment where people feel belong. Like Vijayanagar Empire extended from south to north, right? Like mostly even the northern part of India was part of Vijayanagar, but Vijayanagar Empire didn't have a lot of hold in Kerala.
Yeah.
Because Kerala had a different kind of culture, and they were already trading with people. Like, I mean, one of the things I already mentioned in my TED speech, right? Like when you think about religions coming into India, you think like Islam would have come with a Turkic invasion or a Mughal invasion, right? But there was already a mosque built in 629 AD in Kerala during the time of the Prophet. So this was the second oldest mosque in the world, after the one in Saudi.
I'm sorry, second oldest mosque
in the world.
And this located?
This is in Kerala. It's a place called Kodungalur.
Okay.
Kodgalur, this Cheraman Jama Masjid, that's what it's called.
Okay.
Basically, the story is like the Chera king goes to Saudi Arabia, he adopts Islam, and then he comes back and builds the mosque because there are a lot of traders who are coming and they need a place to pray, right? So, and similarly, right, the oldest church in India is in Kerala. So it was apparently built between 12th century to 52 CE. So that's very close to after the Common Era, right? Like 52 years after the Common Era, you have a church which was built in Kerala, right? So, uh, and the oldest operational Jewish mosque in India is in Kerala.
Okay.
So it's interesting if you are somebody who likes Google Maps and you like plotting geographies. All these places, all these religious institutions were probably like say 15-20 miles from each other.
Okay.
And the reason is there is a big port called Busiris. It's called Muchiripattanam, which used to trade with a lot of outside. So Buchiripattanam was one of the biggest ports in South India at that time, and used to trade with Arabs, Romans, Persians, Chinese, and all. So all these people would have come to these places, and this whole culture exchange happened, right? And the regions comes with trade, and then you kind of establish your. And this I'm talking about like 1500 years back, right? And still all these religions existed in this country, right? Like, I mean, when you think about Christianity, you think the Portuguese bought it, right? That it just came with the British and the missionary. Obviously it expanded through that, but there is always portions of this in India, right? Like, and you can see Jain temples in Wayanad if you've been to Wayanad. There are like a couple of Jain temples which are built in 11th century, 12th century. Shravan Belgola, right? Like it's a big Jain statue, right?
Yeah.
Which this was again built, right, in 12th century. And Jainism is not something which is native to South India, like if you think about it. But Shravan Belgola is a big Jain pilgrim location, right? It's because people traveled, people spoke to each other, people conveyed the ideas. Buddhism went all the way to Southeast Asia, right? Like similar to what Hinduism happened. So when I look at the Indian context, like the Indian Ocean is the place where all these interesting things happened. When I look from West, it's basically how cultures came to India, and East is mostly how Indian culture was taken to different countries, right? Your Cambodia, your Vietnam, your Bali. I was in Bali. I was telling you, right? Like Bali had a very rich Hindu culture. Like it's a country which has 80-85% Muslims, um, uh, and still that country doesn't stick on to some conventional way of naming. I was telling my Grab driver's name was basically Ram Muhammad.
Grab or
Gojek or Grab,
Yeah.
some of those apps, and basically the driver's name was like Ram Muhammad. I was very fascinated, right? It's because they embrace their culture, right? Like I embrace my culture. I mean, this was in reality, and they love watching Ramayana plays happening in different temples. It's called Ketchak dance. So it's okay to have a different faith now. I think the real class comes when you can embrace what your ancestors were doing, or the embrace their culture. This country belonged to the certain people. They had a certain culture. I'll embrace it. I'm not telling I'm going to follow the faith or something, but I can embrace the thought. Okay, there are a different kind of spectrum of people living in this country, right? And that embracing is what all is required to, I think, for people to like accept and like move on with lives, right? So I think as long as you embrace other cultures and other people, I think that's the best way to look at it.
History is a very delicate subject, especially when we look at it from a lens of religion and other things. Especially, we live in a very polarized world. I mean, polarization is quite existing. It's in existence. Let's not kid to each other saying no, it doesn't exist. No, it does exist, unfortunately. But the fact is, when you look at history from a political lens, from a from a conquest lens,
Yep.
you get to have more proper, different perspectives.
Yes.
If you look at it from a lens from only religion and practice of religion and growth of religion, then you suddenly become a little more biased towards your approach.
Exactly.
If you look at if you treat, say, ex ruler, irrespective of his or her religion, with the lens of him or her being a politician, you will figure out what really happened. Because when you mentioned the funny thing that you mentioned, I mean, the story that you mentioned about Tipu Sultan, there was one kingdom where he actually wanted to destroy our Hindu temple.
Yep.
And there's
Otherwise,
one
he was funding.
kingdom, another kingdom who were their allies, who pledged allegiance towards.
He was funding those temples.
He was funding those temples.
Exactly.
You can only understand this if you look at it from a political lens. You cannot look at it from a religion lens.
you don't stop at a point, right? Like say you read one story, you don't stop at, okay, now I'm getting an like thought about, okay, how this person was. I mean, imagine yourself, right? If your kid hears, your kid comes and hears a story when you were like early 20s, he will think you're a ruckus, man. Like they'll think you're a train wreck, right? Like you're just telling that first story of like when you're 20 to 25. It's just a train wreck, right?
Yeah.
But only when he'll get a perspective of the person who you are when you tell the story from when your childhood to your 30, 40s, right? So you have all spectrum of things you have done in all these years, similar to every part of history, right? You're talking about a history of 30 years. There's a history of 3,000, 4,000 years. There's so many nuances to it. Like there's so many pieces which is not even explored, right? I mean, how many layers have we even dug, right? Like there are so many layers beneath to even dig in history. And South Indian history is even more because one, it is less explored compared to North Indian history, because they had like even visible structures, which was like, because it was recently built, our structures would have been even under probably Dwaraka. Like example, it's even there are expeditions like underwater expeditions to see if that city existed. And think about climate change and all, it's possible. Yeah. It is possible that this city will sink. There are reports which says that Mumbai might sink in the next 100 years. If the say rate of global warming goes up, right? So similar cities would have got under the water or under the earth, and there are multiple layers of.
I think they actually found something that looks like Dwarka.
You need funding for these expeditions, right? Like
that's the thing, right? Archaeological Survey of India, they're doing quite a few good things these days, but again, it's not a subject that many people are interested in because of the kind of history that we learn in school. Yeah. Right? I mean, if you learn and if you fall in love with physics in school, you will aspire to become a physicist. Yeah. If you love chemistry, it's the same thing. Unfortunately, our education system never made people fall in love with history. That's why there are not many historians. That's why there are not many people in archaeological survey. Again, it's all a supply-demand thing, right?
Yep.
If there are more people pursuing archaeology, obviously there'll be more funding coming to it.
Exactly.
And more funding means more research. And more research means more nuance.
History was never a profession which was considered to be a money-making thing, right? Yeah. And our idea is like finish your 12s, do engineering, do CA, do IM, then they like make enough money in life. Yeah, like history doesn't offer that path for you, right? Like it's just a not fancily economical profession to take in, right? So when you look at the terms of economics, we won't pursue history for that matter. But I think
more people are getting curious about history.
So that is what I'm telling, right? You don't need to be a history student to study history. I mean, if I am from Kerala, you're from Karnataka, if you're having a 1 hour conversation, we'll have so many things to just share. Yeah. You wouldn't even know. You're just like, 250 miles from Musiris, right? Like if you think about it, you don't even know that place existed, right? That is the interesting part. Like only when people start talking it in a mainstream setting, I think that is when people also like, you don't need kids to like study through textbooks. Kids are very smart these days. Like they'll watch YouTube videos, they'll figure out what they want to think about it, they want to believe in,
and
right?
They'll give their perspective on the historian as well. Exactly. Like, no, I don't like this guy's writing because I feel he's
like too left or he's too right? So they're very smart, right? So I think the generation before, like our generation, we need to like only learn history through mainstream discussions. And
we learn it from our textbooks because we didn't have Google when we were in school. I mean, then we started doing research on basic stuff, trying to figure out if Google can even give us those information. And the moment we understood that there's so many other historians.
Exactly.
Like, I discovered guys like Ramchandra Guha, Manu Pillai, and all these guys very late in my life. Yep. I wish I'd discovered them a long back, but I mean, it is what it is, right? And recently, even watching a lot of YouTubers who put out content about history. Yes.
It's amazing, right? Like the way people want to think about history is interesting. And again, right now with a full day job, my history is again secondary research now, right? Like I don't have the time to go and do first hand research or like initial. Obviously you'll see things and you'll observe and then you'll think about things and you kind of try to go back and research on it. It's a different thing, but initially you're not going to like go back and dig something and like find that. That's not what you're going to do, right? Like your readings or your understanding of history will come from the readings. The better part is now you have different perspectives. So I'm telling you, like there are people who write good things about Ashoka. We have told, right? Like we've been told that that the battle of Kalinga, then he gets what is it called? He got a realization of life, and then he turns to be a Buddhist, and then he spreads Buddhism across India and Sri Lanka and other parts of Southeast Asia. But there are other schools of thought which says Ashoka was already a Buddhist, and he just used those wars to like spread Buddhism in a violent way, and Buddhism never succumbs to violence. Right, ahimsa is a not a cause in Buddhism. So now there are like too many materials, right? Like earlier that option was not there. I only get to read this. Now I gonna connect this to the other histories. That's how I learned stuff, right? Like how it happened, what happened, and why it happened.
This perspective difference, just to give some context to it, right? It's like saying, let's say, I'll just give an example of what's happening in the world today. Okay, say the history book in China would be saying something else about India.
Yep.
And the history book in India would be saying something else about China. Now, who's right, who is wrong? If you are in India, you feel the Indian is right.
Yep.
And if you're in China, you think the Chinese is right. Now, if you are a guy who believes in nuanced perspectives, you read both sides and try to figure out what is the common ground. This is giving an example of what's happening in the world today with what has happened in the past. So even the guys who, like, for example, when the British wrote Indian history, they wrote it from the lens of the winners of different wars, right? And then when British, obviously, they wrote it in their own nuanced way. And then when Indians wrote history about the British rule, they took snippets from that and they added their own
layer of nuances to it.
So that's the problem. But if you want to really understand history, this is what I think will work, right? I mean, we are in Bangalore right now. Many people don't even understand the history of Bangalore.
Yep.
That's okay, true. So just to give you some context, there's a Kempe Gowda's pillars. There are 4 pillars in Bangalore. Everyone, about 85% of Bangalore's population will know where one pillar is. That's inside Lal Bagh. The rest, where are the other 3? No one knows.
Even I don't know. So. Like even a history book, I don't know, right? Like because
right. Yeah. And then there's a cave temple in Bangalore. It's called Gavi Gangadhara Temple. Okay. I've spoken to so many native Bangaloreans who are not even aware that there's a cave temple in Bangalore, where the door has a huge lock.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and this is located in South Bangalore, by the way. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. You go down to Mysore. You go to Mysore, people talk about Mysore Palace, Dasara, fine, it's amazing. Just go a little further down. You will find a place called Talakad. Have you been there?
Talakad, yeah, I've heard Talakad.
Talakad is it's a geography phenomena. I'll tell you why. You are going through lush greenery and suddenly you're in a desert. It's sand. There's only sand there.
Okay.
There's no mud, there is sand. There's actual sand. And there are temples that are even now coming out.
So you're telling there could have been a... Yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about a geography, right? Like, why was there sand, right? Like
no one knows. No one knows about this. Okay. Why am I talking about this? Because see, every state in India, right? North, south, east, west, center, doesn't matter, has a very rich history, very rich culture. Cultural nuances still exist in the form of our food because South Indian food for all my North Indian friends is not just idli dosa.
So there are a lot of people who are doing research on food history now. Yeah. Now there are claims that sambar is not a South Indian dish; it came from somewhere else. So there are like people who do.
You're going to be hurting a lot of sentiments, but anyway, go ahead.
Deep research in food history. So one of my previous bosses, her name is Sujata Shukla. She recently wrote a book called Bhog Naivedya. Okay. She was just trying to research around what are the different kind of offerings you give to different gods across temples. She was trying to dig into what history or what kind of why is this Naivedya was given to this specific god. Like the Puri has that famous dal, right? Dal rice which you give into the Jagannath temple. Similarly, Tirupati has a laddu, and then Sabrimala has that.
I think that's the best laddu ever.
Yeah, it's insanely good.
It's the best laddu I've ever eaten. I don't know the secret recipe or something, but
that is why the secret recipe is what makes it like
it's
more
amazing, man.
favorite,
I just love the laddu in Tirupati laddu. Anyway, coming back.
So that's what I'm saying. So every branch of like your daily life has a history attached to it. Like so, I was having the debate with one of those fitness friends of one of mine, and he was telling like you should eat more meat because that's the only source of protein for you. Like because That has been the constant way, like eat a chicken or uh, to get more protein into your food structure, right? So I was telling it's a concept of availability, right? Like earlier, you cannot expect like 20 years back, I don't expect myself sitting in a village in Kerala having access to broccoli, which is rich in protein, right?
Yeah.
So your only alternate is egg white or
Yeah.
chicken, right? So
Yeah.
people just resorted. Now it is not the case. You can have supplements in vegetarians because it's available. Just order it on any platform. It'll get it into your home, right? So this will again change the dynamics of things, right? Like that perception of. I mean, I'm a uh, I don't want to take a side of not whether veg is good or a non-veg is good, but I'm telling there's perspectives will emerge when you think about like now it's a very simple thought. Like why didn't people eat broccoli back then to access protein? Because they were not, it was not available for them, right? Now this is again a history. So now only when you think about it, you realize, okay, why did this people didn't do this? Because this was not available. That is how history has to be studied. How many years back? Like why did a certain set of people do something? Like I remember my grandmother used to tell, like especially in times of eclipses, that you're not supposed to eat food because it turns to poison.
You're not supposed to get out of the house.
Yeah,
also.
you're not supposed to get out of the house, and you're not supposed to eat because it turns to poison. Now think about it in the context of somebody who was staying in South India some 500 years back. He was somewhere in the forest. What happens in an eclipse? Complete darkness. You were a forest dweller.
Yeah.
If you go out at that time, your chances of getting attacked by an animal is higher.
Yeah.
Your chances of plucking a wrong fruit, which is poisonous, is also high. So now this is a very interesting perspective. So history has to change. Now, if you tell me that if I eat food today during the eclipse time, it turns to poison, there's scientific evidence to it, right? I mean, there are people who claim it has, but I don't believe it. I'm just telling they practice something certain because it was apt for their timeline. They cannot practice that today because it doesn't fit into the narrative or doesn't fit it like that. So if you can think about all these things in a real cause, they tell like don't cut your nails after 7 o'clock or after like the sun has gone down, because obviously you can't see and you'll end up hurting yourself, right? So all this perspective has nothing to do with the religion. It has just to the way the people lived, because they were living with whatever resources were available to them at that point of time. So I think histories should be looked into this angle.
Yeah, that gives me a different perspective. Okay, fear transcends history.
Fear transcends history. Yes.
For example, anything that you were scared as ancestors, even now those fear elements would be ingrained into you even now.
Yep.
Okay, but anything that you were doing which was doing well for yourself, sometimes that kind of fades away.
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, fear is definitely the reason why, I mean, history, if you read Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, right?
Yeah.
Fear is what led people to survive also, right? Like if you're dumb enough to just fight a lion by itself, you would have, that human civilization or species would have got extinct, right? Like it's the fear of getting attacked or getting the survival instinct, right? Basically, that's what helped human evolution to happen, right? So that fear, like you see, you suddenly you're just having a normal day and you suddenly spot a meteor going through your sky and you don't know what's going to happen, right? Then you build astrology around it, like there's going to be a bad omen because you don't know what's happening. So
today, because we have so much of technology that gives you enough information saying, okay, what's an asteroid? When we know we can actually predict eclipses now.
Yep.
Maybe earlier we couldn't.
I mean, that is an interesting part again, like Indian history. Like, see, I'm telling you, like the moment you touch on a certain topic, the history of that topic is like vast. Like there are so many ancient Indian scholars who used to like research in astrophysics, mathematics. Like Bhaskaracharya, for example, he was one of the oldest mathematicians who used algebra and decimal systems and stuff, right? Similarly, there was a famous Kerala school of mathematics. There's a Madhavacharya who used to use this integrate differential calculus and stuff back in like 10th century, 11th century. But the famous figures you hear are basically Pythagoras and the modern European math. I mean, all these are great people, but I'm telling you, there are enough people in India who had that kind of skill sets. I mean, why would an institution like Nalanda had like 8,500 students studying different philosophy, mathematics, science, astrophysics, and all this kind of different.
That was the Harvard Yale of.
That was right, because there is inscription telling that there was coaching centers to train people to get into Nalanda. So it's like that IIT coaching centers, right? Like with Nalanda had a Sanskrit examination that you had to clear a cutoff to get into Nalanda, and there are people who prepare you for that, right? Like that kind of that kind of competitive education. It's not just not Nalanda, right? We had Takshashila, we had Odantapuri, with all these different education centers.
People from across the world
Exactly.
used to come and study in
Yeah,
Nalanda.
you have Chinese, like your Fahian and Huan Sang, you've heard in your history textbook.
yes.
These came to Nalanda, right? They just want to
Yeah.
study from the
Yeah.
Indian scholars. So we had rich education system. We had a robust education system which were used. Obviously, the Macaulay way of things changed later. But I'm telling, like, I'm not telling, like, okay, go and like drop all your Pythagoras and go and try to decode what these old scholars, Indian scholars. But I'm telling, acknowledge it, right? Like, acknowledge that you
Yeah.
also had smart people, right? Like, you also had Srinivasan Ramanujan who discovered zero, right? Like, I mean, Shunya is a concept called Shunya, which came from like Ramanujan found it, but is already used by Aryabhatta, right? Aryabhatta used this concept of Shunya. We limit these people to the satellites we launch, or naming a scientific research building under their name. We got to bring them to mainstream. Like, I'm just telling, like, just now talking between us brings them more, like, everyone knows, every student in India knows Pythagoras. How many of them knows Aryabhatta?
Yeah.
That is a
They
difference.
might know Aryabhatta because
It's still famous. Yeah, I mean, Madhavacharya, nobody knows, right? He's a mathematical genius, right? Like, so
Aryabhatta is known because of the missiles.
Missiles, exactly, right? So you restrict it, but I'm telling, like, that's the mainstream history which people have to talk. People have to talk about things.
You know, I mean, the funny thing is, learn your own place's history.
Exactly.
Okay, leave everything else. Okay, don't worry about what happened in Delhi if you're in Bangalore. If you're in Delhi, learn Delhi's history first. Yeah. Then go to your state. Understand. I mean, for example, you spoke about food, right? The role of millets in Karnataka diet. Okay, have you heard of this dish called ragi mudde? I've had it. Like, you've had it also, I'm not a fan of it, but I've had it. That's been there for ages. Think about that. That's been there for ages in Karnataka. Okay, there's so much of difference between the food that people eat in Kerala and in Karnataka. I was reading about probably like some years back, like how this Rava idli came to concept, right? Like, in India had a food shortage back in like during the Second World War because all the rice was transported to these British camps, right? And you needed rice to cook idli, and rice was not available. That's what I think. Probably MTR or somebody else came with the idea of using rava for idli. Think about the rava idli just being a dish has a history attached to it because of the World War, because people started fighting to each other, right? So that is how the narratives can be built and see what are they eating or what are they. So everything they do has some relevance to why they were doing it. That is the interesting part in history. That's what I like about. I'm less interested. Do you have a sweet tooth? Have you eaten Gutbud ice cream? Gutbud I've had. Like, it's a famous thing in Shantinagar. I've had that. You know where it originated from? No. It originated from Udupi. Oh, okay. Okay. So but ice cream wouldn't have been a part of it. There's a very famous ice cream parlor in Udupi, which basically gave 3 different flavors. Okay. And just called it Gutbud. That's it. And it's actually comes from the word garibidi. That means, it's a little weird. It's a mixture of everything. Avial. We call it avial in Malayalam. No, avial is basically a mixture of all vegetables. Oh yeah, that is okay. This is a mixture of ice cream. Ice cream, it's like 3 flavors. Yep. And that became Gutbud, which is now a mainstream popular ice cream dish. If at least in Bangalore, it's very, very famous. Very popular. Bangalore is famous, yeah. So, I mean, these are small things, right? I mean, I'm telling you, the reason why I like talking about South Indian history and South Indian heritage too much. As a South Indian, I get to hear, like, okay, you are from South India, so idli dosa. That's it. That's all they think about. Exactly. Okay. And Kerala parota for now. Kerala parota with the different gravies. Different gravies, yeah. Even the controversial ones. Yeah, even the controversial ones, yes. So, the fact is, South India is 5 states. Yeah. And every state is different from each other. Forget states, right? Like Karnataka, the Coorg has a different culture. They speak a different language. Coastal Karnataka has a different thing. Karnataka, South Karnataka, we all are different. But, even our dialects of Kannada, okay, the Kannada that's spoken in Belagavi and Shivamogga and all these places are different from what is spoken in Bengaluru. Because it has a Marathi influence, right? Like, because it's part of, I mean, similarly, right? The Kasargod, which is like northern border of Kerala, their Malayalam is it has a mix of Kannada and Malayalam, right? Yeah. Like, so when I was traveling through I was finding it difficult to understand. It was what, like 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers from my house? And the languages changes. So same thing with Tamil Nadu, same thing with Andhra Pradesh, same thing with everything. Yeah. So Even the food, it's so different. I mean, here you eat bisibalebath, you eat jolad roti, and you eat endegai. You have Mysore Pak, which comes from Karnataka. You go to Andhra, they are famous for their Andhra meals which are available, which is like, when I tell my Andhra friends that, listen, the Andhra meals are great, he said, hey, I don't go there, I make it at home. That's what I
Exactly.
eat at
Like, why
home.
will I go to
So why will I go to
Nagarjuna?
Nagarjuna and Nandini and
Yeah.
eat that? And one of them is sitting in this room also. So and he tells me, I make that at home. And when I went to their house and I had the same, the palak dal, it tasted much better than what you get in Nandini and Nandana. Exactly. Okay, that is the Andhra cuisine. You have the different styles of biryani. There is Donne biryani in Karnataka that is very famous here. Yep. There's a different type of biryani that's available in Andhra, much different in Kerala and
Tamil Nadu.
So different.
Bangalore is biryani capital of India. I would say, because I think the availability of different varieties of biryani, if you go to any other metro, will be less.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's because of the cosmopolitan
nature of Bangalore. Right? Like, I don't think you will get Donne biryani in Delhi. Maybe there might be one or two shops
You
giving
get
it.
Delhi-based biryani.
Delhi-based
You
biryani.
get that even in Bangalore.
In Bangalore. Exactly the point, right? So I think at this point, like, Bangalore is residing in a right place. Even the idea of entirely talking about history or probably different things, sitting here in Bangalore today, is a right moment, right? Because you have every kind of people in the city, and you just go catch up for a beer, or you just catch up for a drinks with someone, or go for a dinner.
Which is again the pub capital of India.
India. So you can talk about this stuff, right? Like, you can talk about how their ancestors would have lived in UP, and I can share how my granny used to live in.
The thing about Bangalore, as a proud Bangalorean myself, I tell you one thing about this city. It's the only place where I can see a lot of harmony among different cultures. Okay. We are obviously proud of our local language, culture, and everything, which, by the way, our local language, Kannada, this year, they produced maybe a lot of movies which became massive hits across India. Okay. And they were all culturally nuanced. Kantara was one. Yep. There was a very good movie called 777 Charlie. Yeah, I watched it. It's about a very cute dog.
Relationship between a dog and
a person. That was a beautiful movie. And obviously KGF 2, which took the entire country by storm. Right? And there's so many more movies that are coming up right now from Karnataka movie industry. But people are pro Kannada, that culture is there. But that being said, there's also a lot of harmony between for other state guys to come. We share a lot of cultural nuances. We experiment with our food. Yep. You said something about biryani. You get all types of biryani here. There are Kerala messes that give you authentic Kerala parota with chicken gravy. It's so amazing. You get everything. Yeah. But you go to Mumbai, also you might see the same thing. But in other cities, in Chennai, I don't think you'll get whatever. I mean, I don't think it's
you still might find people, because there are a lot of people who are like now still working in Chennai, because all these MNCs are like located in Chennai. But the spectrum or the variety and the vastness of it is, I think I've seen in Bangalore. I mean, there are people who argue about Mumbai. I don't know. I've not explored a lot of what Mumbai's food scene, but I think that the 10, 12 varieties of biryani, I don't think, like in a 15-minute distance from your house, I don't think only Bangalore can provide.
You know what? I think we should do a 1 hour
only on food, right?
Yeah,
only on food,
but yeah, crazy topic. Yeah. Especially as lunchtime on New Year's Eve, it's it's even more.
It is even more craving,
talk
right?
about this. But I've got a very good segue. Okay, to just end this conversation once. When I see South Indian history and everything, the reason why it fascinates me personally, it's because of the whole Dravidian Aryan thing. Okay, we have Dravidian lineage from South India, correct? Yep. And I would love to hear your side of things and also some facts on Dravidian history. Let's go way back before even all these empires came into picture, like the Cholas. Leave all of them aside. Let's talk about the first people to have actually been in South India. Okay, because we are talking about South India, and I'm sure we will do more episodes on nuances of each state's history, like Kerala history, Tamil Nadu history, Andhra, Telangana, Karnataka, and obviously we'll do other states of India as well. But that being said, let's delve a little bit about the first people who inhabited South India.
So again, my understanding is whatever has been written in books about how
sure.
the species migration happened, the Homo sapiens, and they mingled with the Neanderthals. So the current understanding is basically that it originated from Africa. The entire Homo sapiens as a clan originated in Africa, and then they started migrating to the Gulf region, the Arabia. Some people went north towards Europe. Some people most of them came to India, like the current geography of India. And some of them even went north towards Russia, and then that's how they crossed that bridge from Russia to Alaska and then occupied North America, right? So that's a movement of people across geographies. But there are now being people who are like kind of conducting studies about did it really originate in Africa? Because you didn't study Indonesia. There is a group of tribes in Andaman called Sentinels. Apparently, you can't access that island because it's kind of preserved by the government also. They're apparently been told the pure ancestors from the oldest African or probably oldest humans, right? Homo sapiens, because they've not been interbred or they've not been mixed. They've been always in the island. They don't go out of the island. So they'll be like the pure DNA strand. So there might be enough unearthing which will happen probably in the next 20 years or 30 years, right? So the current understanding is this: they just traveled here, and then uh, some of them definitely, like if you're not, because you cannot, they just kept moving, right? That's what is called nomadic tribes. Basically, they just kept moving from one region to the other. So it came from Africa. It's some of them settled in Persia. That's why you have this Egyptian civilization, the Mesopotamian, the Babylonian, which is pretty old, right? Like it's as good as your Harappan. Then you have the Zoroastrianism, the Iranian civilization. I mean, that's how that concept of Aryan migration happened, right? Now think about migration. Migration is happening every day in history. Like you're looking at 500,000 year timeline. You're not talking about 1 or 2 years. So enough people will definitely move from one location to another. Now the problem when it comes, you use it as a tool to say, okay, that one breed or one kind of people are superior to the other. No. Now, how do you decide superiority? Is it based on fair complexion? Is it based on your skin tone? So that is again an evolutionary trait. Like go back to Darwin. So that's when you have to study evolution. Like people who traveled north or towards the north of the equator, much north, they were they would having a higher melanin content in the skin would cause them more cancer. So the law of natural selection worked in a way that people who had lesser melanin survived, and those people turned out to be fair. And the people who were staying in tropical equatorial region, they need to have melanin in their skin to protect themselves from UV rays, right? So, and these people stayed a little dark. And this is purely an evolutionary trait. It has nothing to do with the class of people or how these people are uh, uh, like put it in a spectrum of whether if it's a fair skinned person is good or if it's a, this has been like even more what do you say, more prevalent after the British rule, right? Like so British wanted to create this ideology that I am a fair skinned superior race to yours. I mean there are like claims that Germany or basically the Germans consider themselves as the Aryans because they have some similar symbols that the swastika is a very similar Hindu symbol, right? Which is used. And then if you look at Persians, right, the Zoroastrianism has the worship of Agni, which is similar to what your Vedic culture of the Agni ritual, right? So there are a lot of these people moved. These people talk to each other. These people exchanged ideas, and it is not like okay, like this person came and like just established a Vedic civilization in India or any of those. Even that Vedic civilization wouldn't have stayed in North. It would have still practiced in South, right? Like there are Vedic preachings. Or I was telling about this Kiradi. There is a site called Kiradi, which is next to Madurai. There is some excavation which happened, and they're dating this civilization which had a good city systems and similar to what was there in Harappa, even BCE, like, even before Common Era. So as we get more evidences and as we keep more digging, I think history will unearth itself and it will have stories to tell. I think that's what we should be prepared for, because if you don't know what you already have in plate by now, you won't be able to appreciate what comes next, right? Like so, you need to know. Okay, this is what the misconception until today was. Like what has changed. If you don't know what has there, you don't appreciate what has changed. So that is a moment I think probably as millennials, the millennial podcast, the millennials, we have to take a stand. And to other point, like history will be topical, history will be debatable. There is no true history. I mean, the only way you can know the true history is probably time travel and go. And be in that specific spot that event happened, right? Like otherwise, there's no. I mean, you can always deduce factual conclusion based on evidences you get, right? That's what maximum we can do. And most of the times it's going to be a debatable topic. It will be having different opinions, and that will come only through active.
I think the problem, what the Indian millennials stand on history is very simple. Okay, it's a share of perspectives. Yep. Number one. Number two, we believe in acknowledging the good, bad, ugly, all sides of history.
Exactly the point, yes.
All right. Now, if you are a fan of some particular empire, there are good, bad, and ugly of the same empire. If you're a fan of X and Y, Z, and if you're not a fan, there's also good of that person. Acknowledge the realities, and also we are pro culture. Yep. Indian millennial stands for being pro Indian culture, pro Indian history. Okay, you might call the Indian millennials a propaganda tool. You might even call Indian millennials whatever. But the fact is, if you are pro culture, it does not mean that you are, pro something else.
You're okay?
Not. You're not pro government. You're not right wing or whatever. We are very centrist in our approach, and we are proud of it. We firmly believe that India needs more centrists who understands and picks a few things from the left and the right, and the same thing applies to history as well. Yeah,
this is a very interesting thing when you spoke about culture, right? Like even India being, the current geography. Whenever we're telling India here, we're just talking about the current map structure of India. In the early ancient Bharat includes Pakistan, Bangladesh, and all these countries.
Afghanistan, Myanmar.
Exactly. So all these countries are part of India, right? Like Bharat is the bigger structure. But when we talk about the current geographies, even say a place like Kerala, where I come from, and say place like where sati was practiced. Basically, the widow will jump into the funeral pyre of her husband. Kerala had widow remarriage at that point of time. So even in a 1,000-mile difference, you had a completely different culture set, right? Like here, there was comfortable widow remarriage allowed in this country, where a similar geography, few miles away, was telling you have to jump into the funeral pyre of your husband.
This is what the problem is. You speak about abolition of sati, you hail Raja Ram Mohan Roy for doing that. Great, no doubt about it. It was
definitely
it was during those times.
Need of the hour.
It was the need of the hour that time. But you come from a state which is also had. I think you've been one of those only states where historically and culturally you've always been a woman empowering. Very tolerant as a state.
Matrilineal system of patriarch, like it is a system where the queen is the chief, and then the power goes to her brothers or her son.
Yeah.
Her husband has no power in a matrilineal system. And even there are like story. I think Manu plays Ivory Throne. I think it's a book which everyone should read. It's a heavy read. It's probably around 700 pages, and he has put in like 6-7 years of his early youth life into researching on this book. It's a very interesting book, and he keeps telling scenarios where if the queen comes, her husband is not even allowed to sit. He's a man, right? Like you think about this in a context of currently, right? Like you think that woman empowerment and all this stuff. Think about it, like a man is not allowed to sit because the woman was sitting.
Yeah.
And there are the man was not allowed to travel in the same palanquin as the woman because woman is the chief and like all this kind of matrilineal system. So I think that is one of the reasons where woman empowerment was there. But again, the flip side is you don't think that the Kerala was the perfect state or they had the best communal harmony. No, there was severe casteism in Kerala back then. Like the untouchables were not allowed to use the same path where the upper caste were walking through. I was telling about the example where people in Kerala didn't used to cover. My grandmother used to say that she's 80, 87. She used to tell she knows like people who works in her house never covered their upper body.
Okay.
So the women never covered their upper body. Now this will be a cultural shock. Now you tell if I want to protect my culture, I want to bring back my culture. You cannot. So you have to change with time.
When I say pro culture, I mean pro history also.
Exactly. I'm understanding. So
and also making sure that your food remains the same. Certain things remain the same.
There are certain
preservation of temples, preservation of ancient mosques in India and churches and everything. Go to Goa. All the churches are very well preserved.
Yep.
Okay, including St. Xavier's Cathedral, right?
It's all ASI, right? Like
ASI it's all ASI marked. The same thing happening. The same thing is happening with temples also. You go to Tamil Nadu, all the temples there. Maybe it's even in Hampi.
Hampi,
also
UNESCO, right?
it's a heritage site. preserve it, but it doesn't come from just preservation. Teach people about the nuances of that place and
Exactly.
the importance of that place. Hampi is a touristy spot today, but Hampi was a capital once upon a time.
So I've read a piece on Hampi which tells that after the Battle of Talikota, which happened in 1565, where the Vijayanagara Empire fell, that city was burned, and it was burning for 7 continuous days. And whatever we see there is after that burning.
Imagine what
Yeah,
was
what
there before.
I don't remember who was the traveler who came from Europe, and he wrote that Hampi was the biggest empire in the world at that point of time.
Wow.
Like it's a written recording. I think Ibn Battuta. Or, I can't remember the name. Sorry, like I don't.
It's fine.
But yeah, you'll be able to find it in Google. But that's the kind of grandness that empire had, right? So my point on culture was that if you're a extremely aggressive clan of people telling that I want to preserve my culture, I want to bring back what my ancestors did, it won't happen. Like you don't expect your ladies to walk bare naked because it was part of your culture. You got to change with time. So culture will change with time. So you got to make the changes according to what.
Accept the good ones that were there. Leave out the bad.
Embrace the bad. I'm telling, just understand that this existed, right?
It existed. Acknowledge it.
Acknowledgement is
Do
right.
not believe that it will work now.
Yeah.
And move on with the progressive ones even then.
Yeah, because
That's how
whatever
it
we
works.
might practice today, 100 years later, that the generation then is like, what rubbishness you're doing? Like,
Yeah.
it is very possible because humans are evolving. We're kind of now we're talking about space tourism and like invading Mars and stuff, right? Like,
You're not invading, you're just taking over because
now
there's nothing to
now
invade
when I
there.
culminate everything and put together in the space of Earth being a smaller, then you get that deep field image from the James Webb Telescope, wherein the exposure of the universe so vast, it'll be light dots at different space, and each of them is a galaxy of its own. And now you think about Earth and the history of Earth from a time period, and then you talk about universe, which is like the deep field image. It shows like millions of galaxies in like a time frame that is the size of a coin if you point it in this thing. And then you're saying like, okay, like, and I'm telling you, like, people have egos bigger than that universe. Like some other people. That's why you're not ready to change or ready to embrace things, right? Like when you think of the larger scale, you're so small. You're a speck of dust, and just live with what you had, and like be happy, right? Like rather than fighting with people on difference. So I was making this point to my friend recently that people try to find similarities very hard when they're a minority, and people try to find differences when they're a majority. So you say
Okay.
me and you, Rohit, if we were in say Iceland, we would find, oh, you also eat dosa, I also eat dosa. Like you eat rice with sambar, I eat rice with dal. Like that we'll be excited to see but the moment we are in Bangalore, we'll say, oh, you eat idli with chutney, I eat with sambar, man. Like, we'll be different. So I'm telling you, it's all a play of where you're positioned.
So if you're a majority, you look for differences.
If you're a minority, you look for similarities. I mean, this is something which randomly happened when I was in.
What is a very profound statement that applies to a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things.
Crazy.
I mean, this happened to me when I was in Bali, and like the people were very excited. They were asking me like, "Are you Hindu?" I said, "I'm Hindu." They get so excited. Then I was like, "Why are they exciting?" Because then I realized, okay, like they're a minority there. They're only 2%, and they're getting excited. So then I realized, okay, like that is when this quote came in my mind. Like people just try to like be different or unique depending on where they are. So I think being happy, understanding like history and all, like important, but I think we still have to live with the current people in a harmony. Mindset, so at times history teaches lessons which you shouldn't be following, and then at times
history has a very funny way of repeating itself.
The people tell it rhymes, probably not to repeat exactly, but it will have a lot of parallels from the past. I don't want to dwell, but there are instances of Me Too movements happening in the earlier parts of this century, like early 19th century, 20th century, where there are like allegations of Me Too movement by people in Kerala. So there is a court case of a person called Savitri, which was which she was trialed for having a adultery, because adultery was a big crime.
Okay.
She was married and she was having affairs, and she was put it on trial, and she was telling like, if you're going to trial me, you're going to trial the men involved. And apparently there were 66 men involved in adultery with her, and some of the bigger heads started falling. Like there are people who, because she was a
This
orthodox.
happened when the British was still in India.
Yeah, this was in early 20th century or
okay.
late 19th century.
Wow.
And the people who were in, she started putting out names, and some of the big heads started falling. Like, oh, this person was also involved. He was also involved. So then it was a kind of a statement, right? Like, why you're holding only a woman accountable? Like, hold the man equally accountable, right? Like, there are like some of these divans of the kings were fallen into the trap, and finally there is like, it's not a real fact, but the fiction goes like this, that when the 64th name came, the king was so arrogant, like, let's stop this, let's not continue about this. And then people told like, maybe king was afraid the 65th name was his. So that is the kind of extent of Me Too movements. Like, if you draw parallels, right? Like, there are women who are standing up and standing for the right. There are some people who tell like she was an example of a people. This is an example for women to like start talking against atrocities against. But I wouldn't believe that. I would think that she was just saving her own thing. If something, because like, if I'm going down, I'll make sure all of you are going down.
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing. But you have your parallels. You're as similar to what you told, right? History will very much rhyme. There will be a lot of parallels to what, because people are the same. History is purely dependent on people, and humans have been the same. Like, you don't change it like 100 years. Your evolution has happened over 35,000, 40,000 years. You won't change in 100 years. So history will keep repeating, I think, and we'll keep. And the way to act when it repeats will depend on your understanding of history. Whether what didn't work out in the past, if you acted in a certain way, you can change it now, because if you have understanding of that. That is why I think learning the history is important, because you can act appropriately if a similar event happens in the future.
This is so. I mean, I just give you my 2 cents on history and the relevance of and importance of learning history in different subjects. Okay, if you're a subject matter expert, and say if you're in technology field, if you're a coder, or if you're a an equity research person, or even if you're a lawyer, okay, take all the professions, and if you understand the history of each of your profession, okay, you can actually design patterns that you will be able to say, you know what, these are my predictions. I have like 100 predictions that might happen in the next few years in my field.
Yep.
And out of 100, I won't be surprised if at least 4 or 5 are right, are spot on. In fact, it can be much more, but I'm being the pessimist here by saying at least 4 or 5 will be right. Because if you understand the history of your own subject, this is what people in the stock markets do. People in financial markets, everything, they do this. What is technical analysis? Basically, reading of historical charts, and that is history. It's what has happened in the past to predict what might happen in the future. Same with fundamental analysis, saying, okay, this happened when the economy was in a similar shape back in the day, and now you're looking at it. This might also happen again. And all these things, because these are all market forces, and market forces itself comes with a baggage of history.
Yeah, it cycles, right?
It's all cycles, and cycles are very funny. I mean, they go up, they come down, but at the same time, they've already been full circles happening. So, role of history in learning anything that we're doing in life in general is actually
especially for the kids of this generation, right? Like, who are coming up. Like, so industrial revolution created this new class of people called mechanical engineers, which didn't existed before industrial revolution, right?
Yeah.
If my dad or probably your dad would have told you become a data scientist in 1995, you wouldn't even know what a data scientist means. They're the highest paid profession today, because it is a digital revolution, right? Like, so, and there are like studies which is put out which says like 80% of the jobs which we currently do will not exist in 2030, because there'll be new kinds of jobs, because if AI takes over, there'll be a new kind of job. So I think that constant understanding of how faster things are moving. It took 100 years from industrial revolution to like move into digital revolution. It won't take 100 years for the next revolution to come, right?
The time span.
The compounding, right? The quantum compounding will happen much faster. So I think that is a very fair point to make. Like, you gotta like understand where you come from and stuff.
Man, Anand, this has been a damn insightful conversation about role of history. Okay, we might not have delved into the historical
History.
subject
I mean,
as such,
yeah, we need
but
like
it's
10 more
a
episodes
crazy
today.
perspective on what happened, how and why is it necessary for history. And I learned a thing or two about Kerala, the history of Kerala, because I was not aware of a lot of things. And
I'm pretty sure if you get someone from Tamil Nadu, he'll have
of
a even
course,
richer
of
history to
course.
talk about, right?
Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, every state in India,
Yeah.
Northeast India, for example, Arunachal Pradesh,
Yep.
Nagaland, Mizoram, you name the state, every state has a very rich.
I'm pretty sure there are a lot of
culture,
people who doesn't
heritage.
even know the seven sisters, right? Like
They won't even know the capital cities of all the
yeah.
seven sisters,
So
unfortunately.
it's an ignorance we have lived with. I think it's better us get over
And
those ignorance and
it
like
should
learn
stop. It's high time. You know, I
Exactly.
mean, I think no part of India should be ignored, and no part of India should be put on a pedestal. It should be uniform, and it should really be a massive growth and development.
And think about it, right? Your country was drawn. The borders of your country was drawn with a ballpoint pen, which, if you look at the current days Google Map lines, it will be a 7 kilometer distance. There will be border disputes. So the way to look at it is like, okay, like there are people who exist.
Wow, the thickness of the 7 kilometers.
So if you the satellite imagery, right? Like they were just drawing a ballpoint pen and they just drew the borders of a country, right? I mean, that's why a lot of the border disputes are happening, right? Because it's a 7 kilometer distance. If you look at it in a satellite imagery, that one line. so
you know, it's scarier, and this was a very scary thought. Even though it's real, it's true, but it's scary.
Yeah, I mean, borders are drawn with no idea. I mean, India was still better. Like if you look at African countries, how they were drawn up,
They
with
had a
just like
ruler.
geometry. They're like scales and like
It's a geometry lesson.
like that's how you divide a country. Like you could have done a better job, British. Like
That's why I think the British, the Europeans, yeah, they did a lot of silly things, and we are seeing it now.
that's a good segment for like, imagine if we become too big, we don't repeat the mistakes what they did, right? Like we're gonna be like.
I think let's hope that we become that big, but let's also hope that we don't do
History
the same
is rhyming. India and China are still growing. They were the biggest economies in 16th century before the colonial era.
Cycle repeats,
Cycles
my friend.
repeats.
Cycle repeats.
So India and China and the Asian economy is coming back.
And let's face it, the whole world is looking at India right now, and it's a good thing, especially for young Indians to be in India and do the right
Great
things.
work.
So yeah, this is the spirit of the Indian millennials and all the
So
millennials.
how we transfer from history to geography to current, predicting future. See, we are all like experts sitting here and predicting future.
We are all experts trying to predict geography also, which I don't want to. But history, history is in the past, so we can talk.
History is the part. We can talk about it.
We can talk about it.
Yeah.
So thanks, man. It was crazy having you on this episode.